first session will be on ESG goals, getting India ready. India, as you know, has set ambitious goals for environmental sustainability in response to its growing economic and population pressures. To discuss some key goals and initiatives that India has undertaken to promote environmental sustainability, let's welcome on stage our first speaker of the day, Dr. Vibha Dhawan, Director General of TERI. Dr. Dhawan, first of all, it's a pleasure to have you with us here, and it's great that we are starting our conclave with a discussion on ESG goals. So when we say environmentally sustainable goals, what exactly are those goals, if you can give us a brief idea, and what is it that we are all looking forward to?
First of all, my thanks to the organizers of this conference to have given me this honor, and being the first person, it becomes very easy because no one had said anything so far except you. Now, when you introduced this particular subject of infrastructure and India as a country, and very rightly you mentioned the dual challenge that we have. On one hand, we have population pressures. We are also saying that we have to develop, and we are already facing environmental related problems. Like come October, and Delhi is the place that you start thinking, is it worth staying in this city? You look at the AQI, what is happening today, and we say it is due to the changing climate, that on one particular day there will be so much of downpour, and therefore the roads get flooded, and it's total chaos on the road and so on. And therefore, what we are now talking about, or why ESG, environmental sustainability, becomes extremely important is that while we can earn money, we cannot survive if environment is not right. And therefore, whatever we are doing, we really have to take care of environment. We have to ensure that whatever action we are taking today, it's not going to impact the world to a state that our next generations find it difficult even to survive. So therefore, governance of our actions becomes, sustainability becomes extremely important. And that is the third G, how do you govern all these? So environment, sustainability, governance. Now again, coming back to India as in developing or very fast developing economy, is that let's look back. And you rightly mentioned that infrastructure in the country is not fully developed. Now, there are two ways of looking at it. One is that we say that because of lack of infrastructure, the growth of the country was comparatively slow. But now it is on the right track, or we are developing compared to many other economies. The growth of India, GDP growth, is much faster. Let's also look at that if we look at the number of young people in the country, that is much more than anywhere in the world. It's an opportunity because we have young workforce. It's also a challenge because you have to provide jobs to those millions of those who are below the age of 25, and we have to be job ready for them. And again, like when we say infrastructure, and we say 2/3 of the infrastructure in the country is yet to be developed. Now, what kind of opportunities it opens for us? And what is happening around the world? Because we are becoming conscious for the environment. And that essentially means that even if you're producing a kg of steel, what is the total GHG emissions? And globally, people are becoming conscious of that. And in fact, if you're exporting steel, the European nations, they are planning to put tax on it, because if it is not done in a proper way. And therefore, when we are looking at the production side of it, and when we say infrastructure is yet to be built, we have the opportunity to build green infrastructure, and that is what country is doing right now. So ESG goals essentially are that you are conscious of the environment, you are conscious of making it sustainable, and it's in a well-governed manner.
Dr. Dhawan, that's very well explained. I just want to understand from you, this is the same goal that countries in Europe are chasing. Those are developed countries. So for a developing country like ours, what are the big challenges as we transition towards green energy, encourage people to adapt to that energy, and then obviously, for example, for EVs as well. Now everybody is moving towards electric vehicles. That is seem to be more environmentally sustainable. But then what happens to batteries? So all these questions people are, at the moment contemplating. These are the thoughts. So first, the challenges for a developing country like ours for energy transition.
Sure. Well, as I just started saying that the impact of climate change is far uglier than what it was predicted. Because I should say a decade before, you really have to convince people and say that if you do this, if the emissions are high, there will be impact on the rain pattern, extremes of temperatures, extremes of precipitation and overall rainfall and so on. And then it was said you had to convince someone. Today, even if you ask a primary child, he'll say it is because of the climate change. And why climate change has occurred, they'll say it is the developed part of the world and industrialization, which has resulted in climate change. What consciousness it's bringing in, we all realize industrialization or the growth of India has to take place. There is no other way. And can that be sustainable? And that is what is the energy transition. Can we move towards energies which are far cleaner than what we were using so far? Like electricity was always generated from coal. And till a decade ago, even renewable was far expensive than what it is today. Because when we started with solar, it was 17 rupees a unit, which has dropped down to even almost 2 rupees a unit. Of course, I'm only talking of the generation cost. I'm not talking about the storage cost, which again adds to it. Now, where the opportunities are, like first of all, let's look back. Why the growth in India was comparatively slow? Why even for infrastructure? It's everything revolves around money. And for us, every unit of petrol, we really had to import it. And therefore, there was a huge burden on the government, on each one of us to import. And once you pay for that, your energy cost becomes very high. And with the result, we were not competitive in the global market. Now, happily, if we look at renewable, and especially if we look at solar, India is blessed with a lot of sunlight. In most cities, it's 300 plus days of sun's availability. And radiation level is also very high. And with the result, the cost of production of solar in India is almost 50% of what it is in Europe. Or otherwise also, I'll say sun doesn't distinguish much between, it shines on all the countries, and therefore we are going to have solar energy available with us. So that infrastructure, and therefore, and I also mentioned initially that 2/3 of the infrastructure is to be built. And therefore we have the opportunity. We don't have to break anything and rebuild. It is building for the first time. And really speaking, that is what perhaps China is going to face that problem, because all their industry is based on the conventional energy. And therefore, when we are talking of cross-boundary carbon tax and so on, it would be little difficult for them to shift to renewables. For us, we still have to build, and therefore we have opportunity to go green. Now, let's look at the government policies. And in Glasgow, COP26, Prime Minister had made announcement, Panchamrit, and those are on the basis of, first of all, that commitment of the government, they want to go green as much as possible. And secondly, those are also based on the industry's wish. He had confidence in our industry that they would also like to go green. And we happily are ahead of what those commitments were made in terms of renewable energy, solar energy, putting up of that. And it says that by 2030, 50% will be producing renewable or solar. We also, government has launched hydrogen mission. So that is largely for difficult to abate sector. Now let me explain to you difficult to abate. Like if you're talking of steel and cement, the requirement of high temperature, it's so high that you really cannot meet it with solar energy and so on. And that's where you require new clean energies like hydrogen, and I'll say in years to come maybe even nuclear. And again, we are intending to move in that direction as well. So when we are talking of building this infrastructure, we have opportunity to build. I mentioned to you government's will, and which is also based on the voluntary movements that the industry is taking in terms of going green. Now, and I'll say that most of the low-hanging fruits, we have plucked those, and now it is that we are stuck with what to do next. Because there are 2-3 problems. First of all is the mindset. Like, you can definitely even plan for a building which utilizes 30 to 40% less of energy. But somewhere at the back of our mind is green means expensive. And therefore, we don't even think or go to those architects who can suggest.
But is it true?
No, well, even if it is true, because see, we'll say the payback period is 6 years, which with new technologies, it has come down to 3 to 4 years. But after 4 years, it's going to be free for you. So why do you think only of the payback period? And we don't, because see, at the back of our mind, environment is still not there. So therefore, if we think of environmental cost, it is something worth going. The other is, and largely for the industry, the problem is capex, because initially they have to put in money. Payback, yes, it will be there, but where will that initial money come from? In COPs, every year we talk about loss and damage fund, we talk of climate fund and so on, but it's actually not coming. So that is where the problem lies. And unfortunately, for developing countries, if you want to take loan, you have to pay 10 to 12%. In Europe, maybe you have to pay 2%, 4%, which is not fair. And the developed world also must realize that they have only one planet to live in. And therefore, sharing of technology should not just be license-based, IP-based, and their motive of making more money. It should be more of how do we clean the environment. And second is the loans. So they should come at much lower cost, internationally as well as within the country. And of course, we are moving in that direction, like green bonds and other things which government is initiating. And one good example is also rooftop solar. So there, the subsidies which are offered by the government, they are great.
You've already touched about on the financial aspect of moving towards the options which are environmentally sustainable. One question comes in here is, one, you've talked about the mindset of private players, but do they actually have the finances, and is the system easy and convenient for them to get into this, so that, from the private players side, we have that initiative that everyone is moving along with the government in this direction?
Well, I'll say yes and no, because there are initiatives being taken. Internationally also, if we look at World Bank, ADB, and number of Global Environment Fund and Global Climate Fund. So there are a number of initiatives where soft loans or even the demonstration project money is available. But I'll also say that this is not adequate. And many a times, like if you are talking of greening of shipping sector, so they have to invest a lot of money. So either it should be subsidized by the government, or it is the consumer pays. And right now, I don't think so we have reached to that level of awareness among clients that if there is something available like green steel versus the other steel, you'll say, I'll prefer to buy. How does it matter? We always take it, maybe my efforts doesn't count, and therefore it's a price sensitive market. So I'm not bothered how much, I'll only pay less and not that it is produced in sustainable way.
I just have a very quick question here because 2 points you are raising. We'll talk about responsible consumers in a bit. From government side, do we have any schemes that can help in making this energy transition possible? And if there are, if you can just list out.
Yeah, I just listed out one, that is the solar rooftop.
Right.
There is a lot of funding available for solar pumping because, as you know, agriculture is the largest consumer of water. And unfortunately, in the rural India, while every village is electrified, there is still a problem of reliable supply of electricity. And with the result, they just switch on their tap and sleep at night, irrespective of how much water their crop requires, because electricity is free. So once you give them this opportunity of solar pumping, they have two options. One is crop diversification. Should I be using water for growing paddy? Or should I be using this or resell this electricity to the grid? And it will also give me opportunity to process my food. And that is how the industrialization at the rural levels will take place, decentralized energy production. So there are, and then the most important scheme which is now coming up is of green credits. And therefore, if a farmer grows trees, he can buy green credits. Similarly, if they shift to cleaner practices, they should be compensated. We are working in that direction. And even things like moving away from firewood to clean cooking fuel will give them that opportunity. And of course, it goes without saying, and we have to go a long way, that government is insisting on appliances which are more energy efficient. So solar rooftop and other things. And even on the larger platforms, like when you talk of, like TERI is doing one project with Ministry of Shipping, which is on green ports and shipping. So you are looking at what kind of fuel ship should use and how it should be constructed. So there are a number of such initiatives.
Right. So the government is doing its bit. Industry, private players need a slight nudge, need a slight motivation to move towards it. Yeah. My next question is specific to the Aam Aadmi, the consumers. How can people become responsible consumers if we have to attain these ESG goals?
Sure. I'll also like to say that industry is doing quite a bit. It is, and many of them, because while India has said that they'll go net zero by 2070, most of the industry, they are making their roadmaps of 2040, 2050 kind of scenario. So they want to go net zero by then. So they are doing quite a bit. So my compliments to them. Your other question is that what are we doing? Now, first of all, I'll say we are not aware. What can we do? And that is where you might be aware this entire campaign of the Prime Minister, that is Mission Life. So life is basically to sensitize us that each one of us get impacted by climate change and each one of us add to climate change. And I'll say it is right from a school-going child to each and us, because many a times proudly we say that per capita in consumption of energy of average Indian is 1/3 of American, which is not correct. It is largely because many of us don't have access to energy and money to afford that energy. And therefore, there is large part of the population who is with this kind of scenario. If I ask you and me, I don't think so we are any better than at least European, because Americans are really bad. So that is what we also need to worry about, that as the economic development will take place, the very first thing on which you invest is energy. You buy two-wheeler, three-wheeler, air conditioner, 1 room, 2 rooms, 3 rooms, and that's what is also impacting the environment. So what is important for me is to say how much energy I'm consuming. Is there a dashboard? If I have used car for going to my office, I should also have that, okay, I came by car, they should tell me this is what your emission levels, or this is CO2 emissions. If I have used public transport, this is what it is. So at the end of the day, I should say, what is it I have done during the day? we should become conscious, like it is not affordability while we are buying clothes. It is more of, if I'm buying or filling my almirahs with clothes, it is that each preparation of each cloth cost GHG emissions. So is it while buying anything I should only think of my pocket, or I should think beyond it, and that's the environment. So that consciousness needs to be brought. You look at children, 18 degrees air conditioner, why? That when the temperature, even these days, it's so pleasant. But let me ask each one of you, do you sleep in air conditioning or you try to open a window? The excuse we give is too many mosquitoes, but were they not there 20 years back? They were there then also. So we are not conscious today.
So essentially, the consciousness of being responsible consumers should come from each and every individual, because what you're saying is that tracking a huge population like ours with some sort of a tag as to what is your energy consumption and how much fuel wastage has happened in a day is practically impossible, correct?
I don't think so. It is impossible, because I'll say that if you bring out this awareness, we can actually do it, and we have to lead by example. And I'll say our generation has a lot of role to play to educate our children. And also somewhere it should be more like, if someone is trying to save energy or recycle, we should not say that ye kanjoos hai, kya karega itna paisa. It should be more of that we should say that these are the people who are trying to protect the environment and sustainability. So that sustainability part has to go.
No, I think that's on that thought-provoking note, I would like to thank you, Dr. Vibha Dhawan. Thank you so much for joining us for this very engaging, very insightful session. Ladies and gentlemen, please a round of applause for our first speaker of the day, Dr. Vibha Dhawan. Ma'am, I'm going to request you to stay with us on stage for just a bit, as I'm going to invite my colleague, Mohit Roy Sharma, Senior Executive Editor of ABP Network, to